The annual Technology Innovation Gala was the social event of the season in downtown San Francisco. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the red carpet as tech executives, venture capitalists, and industry leaders gathered in their finest attire. The event celebrated breakthrough innovations while raising funds for STEM education programs in underserved communities. Alexandra Sterling adjusted her diamond necklace as she stepped from her limousine, her champagne-colored gown catching the camera flashes from photographers lining the entrance. As CEO of Sterling Tech Solutions, she had built her company from the ground up after inheriting a small software firm from her father. At 34, she was known for her sharp business acumen, her perfectionism, and her intolerance for anything that might tarnish her company's carefully cultivated image. The gala was particularly important tonight. Alexandra was announcing a major partnership that would revolutionize educational technology, a deal worth hundreds of millions and years of negotiations. Everything had to be perfect. Every detail had been scrutinized, every guest list reviewed, every protocol established. As Alexandra entered the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. She greeted investors, smiled for photos, and discussed market projections with the ease of someone who lived and breathed corporate success. It was during her conversation with the mayor about the new education initiative that Alexandra noticed him, a man in his early 40s wearing work clothes instead of formal attire. He had dark hair touched with silver at the temples, weathered hands, and the quiet bearing of someone more comfortable in the shadows than in spotlights. He was clearly a hotel employee, probably maintenance or security, but something about his presence at her exclusive gala felt wrong. Alexandra's assistant, Jennifer, approached discreetly. "Miss Sterling, there seems to be some confusion at the registration table. A hotel employee is trying to enter the gala. He claims to have an invitation, but obviously there's been some mistake." "Handle it," Alexandra said curtly, not wanting to be bothered with such mundane issues. "This is a private event. Security should ensure only invited guests are admitted." But as the evening progressed, Alexandra kept noticing the same man. He wasn't causing any disturbance. In fact, he seemed to be staying carefully out of the way, but his presence bothered her. This was her night, her moment to shine, and she couldn't understand why hotel staff would think it appropriate to linger in the ballroom. During the cocktail reception, Alexandra approached the man directly. Up close, she could see he wore a simple gray button-down shirt with dark pants. Clean and neat, but clearly not formal wear. He was holding a glass of champagne and observing the crowd with thoughtful eyes. "Excuse me," Alexandra said, her tone polite but firm. "I think there's been some confusion. This is a private event for invited guests only. The hotel staff entrance would be through the service corridors." The man turned to look at her, and something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps disappointment, but not anger. "Miss Sterling," he said quietly, "I have an invitation. My name is David Martinez." "I'm sorry, but I personally reviewed the guest list," Alexandra replied, her patience wearing thin. "There must be some mistake. Perhaps you could check with your supervisor about your work assignments for this evening." David reached into his shirt pocket and produced an elegant invitation. The same cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering that had been sent to all the gala attendees. Alexandra stared at it, confused. "This can't be right," she said, examining the invitation more closely. "These were only sent to major donors, industry leaders, and special honorees." "I know," David said simply. "I was invited as one of the community heroes being recognized tonight." Alexandra felt heat rise in her cheeks. There had been a section of the program dedicated to recognizing local heroes, people who had made significant contributions to their communities. But she had assumed these would be other business leaders, prominent volunteers, people who looked like they belonged at such an event. "I'm sorry," she said stiffly, "but I'm not familiar with your contributions. What organization do you represent?" David was quiet for a moment, and Alexandra could see something shift in his expression. Not anger, but a kind of sadness that made her suddenly uncomfortable. "I'm a paramedic," he said finally. "I work for the city. I was nominated by the mayor's office for my work with the Mobile Crisis Response Unit, helping people in emergency situations. Alexandra felt a flutter of confusion. A paramedic? At her gala? How had this happened? She prided herself on knowing every detail of her events, every guest who would be in attendance. I see, she said, trying to recover her composure. Well, I suppose there was some miscommunication. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the community tables toward the back of the ballroom. David looked at her for a long moment, and Alexandra had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing something about her that she didn't want revealed. Of course, he said quietly. I understand. As David moved away, Alexandra felt both relieved and strangely unsettled. She returned to her networking, but something about the interaction bothered her. There had been something in the man's eyes, a kind of recognition that she couldn't place. The gala proceeded smoothly through dinner and speeches. Alexandra delivered her presentation about the new educational partnership to enthusiastic applause. The silent auction raised record amounts for the STEM programs. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. It was during the recognition ceremony for community heroes that Alexandra first began to understand her mistake. The mayor stepped to the podium to introduce the evening's honorees. Tonight, we celebrate not just technological innovation, but the human spirit that drives us to help one another. Our first honoree has saved 37 lives in the past 2 years through his work with our Mobile Crisis Response Unit. Alexandra watched from her front row seat as David Martinez stepped onto the stage. In the spotlight, she could see him more clearly. The quiet confidence in his posture, the genuine humility in his expression as he accepted recognition for his service. David Martinez has pioneered new protocols for emergency response in our city, the mayor continued. His innovations in crisis intervention have been adopted by emergency services across the state. But beyond his professional achievements, David represents the very best of human compassion, someone who runs toward danger when others run away. The audience applauded warmly, and Alexandra felt a growing sense of unease. This wasn't just any city employee. This was someone who had been specifically honored for heroism and innovation, someone she had dismissed and marginalized because of his appearance. But it was the mayor's next words that stopped Alexandra's heart completely. David's most notable rescue occurred 18 months ago, the mayor said, when he responded to a multi-car accident on Highway 101. Despite significant personal risk, he extracted an unconscious driver from a vehicle that was in danger of explosion. The driver had suffered a severe head injury and would have died without David's quick thinking and medical expertise. Alexandra's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. 18 months ago, Highway 101. A car accident that she barely remembered because she had been unconscious for most of it. The woman David saved that night, the mayor continued, went on to make a full recovery and is now one of our city's most prominent business leaders. She's actually here with us tonight. Alexandra Sterling, CEO of Sterling Tech Solutions. The spotlight swung to Alexandra's table, and every face in the ballroom turned toward her. But Alexandra wasn't seeing the crowd. She was seeing fragments of memory that she had tried so hard to forget. The rain, the other car running the red light, the impact, the smell of gasoline, the darkness closing in, and then a voice, calm, reassuring, professional. Stay with me. You're going to be okay. I've got you. Gentle hands checking her pulse, stabilizing her neck, working to free her from the twisted metal. A man's voice talking to her constantly, keeping her conscious when all she wanted to do was sleep. Can you hear me? I need you to stay awake. Help is coming, but I need you to keep talking to me. She had never seen his face clearly, had been drifting in and out of consciousness. But she remembered his voice, his hands, his unwavering presence during the most terrifying moments of her life. The paramedic who had saved her life was David Martinez. The man she had just dismissed as unworthy of attending her gala was the reason she was alive to host it. Alexandra rose unsteadily from her chair, her face pale with shock and shame. The entire ballroom was watching her, waiting for her response to the mayor's recognition. But all she could see was David, standing quietly on the stage, looking at her with the same patient, kind expression she remembered from that terrible night. She made her way to the stage on shaking legs, her diamond gown suddenly feeling like a costume, her carefully crafted image crumbling around her. When she reached David, she looked up into his face, really looked at him, and saw not a hotel employee who didn't belong, but the guardian angel who had given her a second chance at life. "You," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It was you," David nodded quietly. "You probably don't remember much from that night. Head injuries can affect memory." "But I do remember," Alexandra said, her voice growing stronger. "I remember your voice. I remember you telling me I was going to be okay. I remember you staying with me." She turned to face the audience, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you an apology, and David Martinez an apology that could never be adequate. Earlier tonight, I made assumptions about this man based solely on his appearance. I questioned his right to be here, at an event he had been specifically invited to, because he didn't look like what I expected a hero to look like." The ballroom was absolutely quiet. Alexandra continued, her shame giving way to a fierce determination to make things right. "David Martinez didn't just save my life 18 months ago," she said. "He taught me something that I apparently hadn't learned until this very moment. That heroism doesn't wear a tuxedo. That worth isn't measured by wealth or status. That the most important people in our lives are often the ones we never think to notice or thank." She looked directly at David, her voice breaking with emotion. "You asked for nothing. You expected nothing. You simply did your job with skill and compassion, and then you disappeared back into your life, probably never thinking about it again. But I think about that night every single day. Every morning when I wake up, every evening when I come home to my family, I'm alive because of your courage and expertise." Alexandra paused, gathering her thoughts. "I built my company on the principle of innovation, of seeing possibilities that others miss. But tonight, I failed to see the most important possibility of all, that the person standing next to me might be exactly the hero I never knew I needed to thank." She turned back to David. "You saved my life, and I repaid you by questioning your right to be treated with dignity. I am deeply, profoundly sorry." David was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same calm strength that Alexandra remembered from that terrifying night. "Miss Sterling, we all make mistakes when we're afraid or uncertain. The measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes. It's what they do after they recognize them. What can I do?" Alexandra asked. "How can I possibly make this right?" David smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all evening. "You just did. Recognition matters. Apologies matter. But more than that, maybe this experience can help both of us remember that everyone we meet is fighting battles we know nothing about, and everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what job they do." The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation. But Alexandra barely heard it. She was thinking about all the assumptions she had made, all the people she had dismissed, all the opportunities she had missed to see past surfaces to substance. "David," she said, "I know this might sound presumptuous after how I treated you tonight, but would you consider consulting with my company? We're developing emergency response technologies, and we need someone who understands what first responders really need. Someone who's been there, who knows what works and what doesn't." David considered this carefully. "I'd be honored to help if you think my perspective would be valuable." "Your perspective," Alexandra said, "is exactly what we've been missing." 6 months later, Alexandra stood in the conference room of Sterling Tech Solutions, watching David Martinez present the prototype of an innovative emergency response system he had helped develop. The technology would allow paramedics to transmit real-time patient data to hospitals, dramatically improving survival rates for trauma victims. The board members, many of whom had been at the gala that night, listened with rapt attention as David explained the practical applications of the system. His insights had revolutionized their approach to emergency technology, and the partnership with the city's emergency services had become one of the company's most successful initiatives. After the presentation, Alexandra and David walked to her office, a space that now displayed photos not just of business achievements, but of the community partnerships and social programs that had become central to the company's mission. "You know," Alexandra said, settling into her chair. I've been thinking about that night at the gala. About what you said about everyone fighting battles we know nothing about. What about it? David asked. I was so focused on protecting my image, on making sure everything looked perfect, that I forgot about being an actual person. I had become so successful at playing the role of a CEO that I had lost track of being Alexandra, David nodded thoughtfully. Success can be isolating. When you're responsible for so much, it's easy to forget that vulnerability and connection are strengths, not weaknesses. That night you saved my life, Alexandra continued. You saw me at my most vulnerable. I was hurt, scared, completely helpless. But you didn't see a CEO or a successful businesswoman. You just saw a human being who needed help. That's the job, David said simply. When someone's in crisis, none of the external stuff matters. Just the person. I want to remember that, Alexandra said. In everything I do, every person I meet, every decision I make, I want to remember that we're all just people who sometimes need help, who deserve dignity, who have value that has nothing to do with what we accomplish or what we own. David smiled. That sounds like a good business philosophy. It's not just business, Alexandra replied. It's life. As David prepared to leave, Alexandra stopped him with one final thought. You know, you saved my life twice, she said. Once on Highway 101 and once at the gala. The first time you saved my body. The second time, you saved my soul. David paused at the door. We all need saving sometimes, Alexandra. The lucky ones are those who get a second chance to be better. That evening, Alexandra drove home through the city streets, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The crossing guard helping children safely across busy intersections, the maintenance workers keeping the parks beautiful, the countless people whose daily efforts made her life possible. At a red light, she watched a paramedic unit speed past, lights flashing, heading toward someone's emergency, someone's worst day, someone who would need a hero. She thought about David Martinez, who went to work each day ready to run toward whatever crisis awaited him, who saw past circumstances to humanity, who saved lives not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And she thought about the lesson she had learned that night at the gala. That heroes don't always wear capes or crowns. Sometimes they wear work clothes and carry medical equipment and speak with quiet voices. Sometimes they're standing right next to us and we don't even notice. Until we learn to see with our hearts instead of our assumptions. The light turned green, and Alexandra drove toward home, grateful for second chances and the heroes who make them possible. The end.